Um, I was thinking, just while everyone was talking about something that's very Canadian, and thinking about, we're a wild country, and someone once upon a time made a really great decision, and they decided that it was important that all of us knew that. We knew about the fact that we lived in a country that was wild, with lots of wild spaces, and they wanted us to know about the snowy owl, and the common loon, and the who's who of our hinterlands. And it's something that we all share, and I just think it's fantastic and very Canadian. And I've spent a lot of time in the wild parts of Canada. I was lucky. I grew up with a cottage inside Algonquin Park. But when I was 26, I moved to Banff, one of the most wild places probably in Canada. And when you arrive, you're not surprised at how wild it is, because that's the way it's supposed to be. You're expecting to see animals everywhere. But at the same time, it comes as a shock, because, it's one thing to sort of imagine them sort of as scenery, and then an entirely different thing to, have these, giant, muscular animals, wild animals, just, sharing the sidewalk with you. And it affects you every day. Every single day, in some way, the wildlife affects you. It's a house party being canceled because a cougar was spotted in the neighborhood. These are cats that kill people, and they kill people every year in BC and Alberta. And, everyone just accepts that as like a thing. It's like this, it's a cat that kills people. And I'm like this, okay, I guess there's no party tonight. Or, hungover and rushing to get ready for work and opening your door, and there's an elk pressed right up against your house. And you might not be a kind of climbing out the window kind of person. And you're just very, very late for work, And I remember going around a corner really fast, and I had an elk right in front of me. And, everyone just thinks that that's, like part of the process of buying fudge, that's how things work. And I arrived in the summer, and I had an amazing, it's Banff, I was 26 and I had a great time. I didn't have time to think about how much fun I was having. But very, very quickly, things got colder and quieter and much darker. 3:30 in the afternoon darker, and that's really depressing. And I was a little lonely. There were fewer tourists around that I was meeting. And I was constantly being reminded that, oh God, we live in the sexually transmitted capital of Canada, Everyone's talking about it. And the only thing I had to show for my time in Banff was frostbite scars on my ears. And a really comprehensive knowledge of the tragically hip. I wanted swabs and broad spectrum antibiotics like everyone else. Calgary was always an option, but I don't drive, so it was always a hassle. And also, it's Calgary. I know it's changed, but it's not a destination really. But I thought there had to be a local solution. And after a bunch of drunken misunderstandings with some people, some men, some of which very nearly landed me in the emergency room, I had the idea to place a personal ad in the local free newspaper called The Wildlife. And there were always a couple of personal ads on the same page as flowers and fish heads. It was always stupid, fish heads to the guy who, blah, 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 took my ski pole. So I went to the office and I gave her the text of the ad, and she said, all right, is this a joke? it's a guy for a guy, and I'm like this. Yeah. And it took me 10 minutes to convince her I was gay and serious. Like, I've never had to convince anyone. Ever. I mean, it was... I almost just left. And it ran in the next issue, and 3 or 4 days later, I got my first reply. And I opened the letter, and the first thing I noticed was his name. His name was Carter. And he must have been at the leading edge of that sort of bullshit made-up name kind of thing. Because I just remember thinking, or whatever, non-conventional names, let's say, you know, like Michael. I just remember just thinking about it, thinking, why is his name Carter? Why would it be, you know, but, and the next thing I noticed is it looked like, you know what it looked like? It looked like somebody had knocked over a jar of exclamation marks and it spilled all over the page. He was excited. He was excited to be away from home for the first time, and he was beside himself with all the new adventures he was having. I had my tongue pierced at Stampede, he wrote. Crazy, hey? People from Saskatchewan say hey instead of a. They say it a lot, actually. And he wrote, and I mean, I realized quite quickly I hadn't discovered some secret, you know, BAM salon or some, you know, like, you know, but I had an itch that needed scratching. And as far as I could tell, you know, he, you know, was probably capable of helping me with that. So we made a date to meet at a sort of Mexican restaurant that I really liked, and it had nothing to do with the food, but it did have Jägermeister on tap. It's fabulous. And we met there, and he'd never had Mexican food or Jägermeister. He was not excited about the food, but took to the Jägermeister like a champ. And after his, I don't know, 4th shot, he wiped some off his chin and confided that actually he wasn't really much of a drinker normally. And he talked and talked about some exciting stories he had, and this is thirsty business listening to him talk. And I drank a lot, and he drank a lot, and before too long we were both very drunk. Drunk enough that he invited me to his house, which was great because it was closer than mine, and it was on sort of relatively flat ground. And, you know, you sort of, in Banff, you get a bit fed up with switchbacks every time you have to, you know, go home. And we got there, and he led me into his bedroom, and it was dark, and I was standing against the wall. And he said, he said, I'd like to give you a blowjob. You know. It was a little spicier than that, but that's what he said. And, I mean, all things being equal, you usually don't make people ask twice. It's just bad manners. And they might change their mind. So off he went. And I was really drunk, and you know, he was really enthusiastic, but Jägermeister trumps enthusiasm. 9 times out of 10, I think you'll find after 25. And after a while, he made no progress. There was no progress at all. And, you know, I wasn't just bored, but it was starting to hurt. And I was sort of thinking, well, at least I have my clothes on. I can just go now. Like this is, you know, I don't have to kick him out, whatever. And all of a sudden, like, all of a sudden, I was sort of looking down, trying to figure out, like, what was going on? You know, like, what was it, you know, like, it's odd. It was, odd. And I'm looking down, but I can't see anything because it's dark. And all of a sudden, he starts just frantically slapping his hand on the wall and finally hits the light switch. And I was looking down, and our eyes met immediately, probably because his entire face and most of his hair was just soaked in blood. With a look of horror on his face that it's just, well, you don't forget some things. And he was obviously in shock because he didn't move well, more blood, and I'm the worst person in an emergency. I'm the person just running around screaming, but I don't know, it was probably the nature of, the emergency that I snapped into action very quickly. I had my wits about me, I had a plan, I grabbed a tube sock and tied everything off, and I was going to go to the hospital. And it was, I don't know, 8 blocks or something, not very far, but there was a bridge I had to cross, and I got to the bridge, and it was packed with elk. Just packed. And the next bridge is Calgary, and I yell at them and nothing, and I throw very big rocks at them, which is a really bad, not a good idea at all. These are dangerous. And nothing. And there's, I would have had to walk on their backs, so I finally go down to the river, and I'm like, well, I'll just have to swim across the Bow River, which is 1 degree Celsius, or so, which I never would have survived, ever would have survived. And then suddenly this idiot tourist in an RV just comes charging through the bridge, doesn't stop at all, and the elk part. And there was just a second where I could run through. And I got to the hospital, and apparently a torn frenulum isn't all that uncommon, which I don't really still believe. And 2 stitches and some surgical glue later, I was on my way home. Oh, and some blood thinners for 2 weeks, just in case. And I got some more replies from my ad, but I should have had to put them off for a while. I tried calling Carter, and he'd left for home. He had enough excitement in Banff. And I decided maybe I'd had enough excitement in Banff. And a Canada 3,000 seat sale came up. And I planned to leave in 2 weeks. But not before I finally got my own little paper cup of broad-spectrum antibiotics. Which was, I don't know, it's just, it felt like I'd arrived even though I was leaving. You have to do your part.